Chapter 0.00001 Back into a Coma by Sky, written in red ink. While I lay on that cold dungeon floor, I dreamed that I floated back into the Kingsland Hospital where I'd been in a coma right after Dad died. It was before I had wings, before I met the Archangel. In the dream, I didn't care about anything. My body felt as light as air. I was hovering high above the ground, half floating, half sinking, lying with my arms out on either side, like you do when you float in the ocean. Everything was really dark, and I ached all over, just drifting in an awful, soupy gloom. Even though I knew I was in a dungeon in my dream, I kept seeing my body lying unconscious in the hospital. Still, I knew I wasn't really there. The darkness of the dream was the same as it had been in my coma. It felt like a war zone, or hell, or an even worse place, somewhere forever cut off from everyone I've ever known, and everything I've ever loved. Suddenly, I was thrown right back into the dream I'd had in the hospital. It was so strange because I believed that I was there, even though I knew that I wasn't. In the half-light, all I could see was destruction, as if there'd been a violent storm. But I suppose it was a train crash. Trees floated past, their roots dangling, dropping clods of dirt, and birds were drifting all around me, upside down like they were in a trance. Things swam by slowly, upended, and somewhere miles away a train screeched and squealed. That sound was followed by a huge bang, an explosion maybe, but dull, as it would be if you heard it through water. The world was wrong as it could be. My body hurt so much, especially my head, and I was cold, so cold. My brain ached and my heart beat slowly as if it might stop. Two frightened children split away from my body. I could see that they were me when I was younger, but they looked terrified, like ghosts hovering in mid-air. I didn't know what to say or do. I just stared at them blankly, wondering what would happen next. There were long, deep sounds and muffled screams. I held my breath. Then came a silence that had no end. Darkness covered me. I wondered if I was dead. Chapter 0.0001 In the Light. This is still Sky, writing in red. After the darkness had been with me for a very long time, I was thrown into a sort of waking dream. I knew that I was dreaming, but I also knew that I was remembering what happened when I was in the coma after Dad's accident. On the last day of the coma, I'd seen a sudden streak of gold burst into the sky far away. At first I thought it was a firework, but to my horror it started coming straight towards me at great speed. When the blazing light reached me, there was a humming noise all around. It was like nothing I've ever heard before. The light had a human form and 6 massive wings which moved slowly up and down. Back in the dream I'd had in my coma, I'd been terrified, but in my dream in the dungeon, I felt strangely calm to know that the Archangel was with me. Even though he was solid, he was surrounded by a strange watery light. When he spoke, the words entered my mind without any sound. The Archangel told me that heaven was sorry that I'd been captured by the Dezgul, and that everyone was there to help, and that everyone there wanted to help me. I tried to ask why I'd been captured, but I couldn't speak. The Archangel asked me to remember that heaven, in fact all of the heavens, had given me wings to help me rise out of the coma after my father died. I nodded. I remembered Gabriel saying, "I'm so sorry, but your father did not survive the car crash. Your brother did, but not your dad." I had wanted to scream back then, "How can Dad be gone? It's not fair. Go then it was as if I really was back in the coma, in the hospital, and I started to weep and weep about Dad. It was like his death was happening all over again. Strangely, even though I was remembering so much about the hospital, I still knew I was inside a dungeon. But was I under the ground, or was I trapped inside a computer game? I really wasn't sure. Why was the dream about Gabriel happening again? Was Ben dead this time? Is that why Gabriel had returned? What about Minnow and Frank? Were they safe? And Six and Jem? I wanted to ask Gabriel what was going on, but my vocal cords wouldn't work, and even if they had, I couldn't open my mouth. I felt so much anger and pain that I thought I would burst. I thought about the strange eruption between my shoulder blades when my wings first emerged. It was as if two kittens were struggling to get out from underneath a tight bandage. Then there they were, small at first and then huge. In my dream, I remembered the first time I stretched out my beautiful wings, golden and wide. A terror had filled me, and it filled me again in the dungeon, taking away my ability to breathe. I felt like I no longer existed, like I'd become something completely foreign to the human race. I started to panic, feeling as if I was an imposter, an alien, a mutant creature with wings. I didn't need anything else to make me the odd one out. My mother had died when I was 6. You'd think that people would be kind about something like that, but they weren't. Sometimes children seem to know how to pick on anyone who's suffering or sad or different. Some teachers do it too, especially the cruel ones. I'd known that with my father's death, the school would become a battlefield again, and that's exactly what happened. I was always being teased about being the freak with the dead mother. After Dad died, I was the freak with 2 dead parents. I thought that if people found out about my wings, I'd be ruined for sure. Except Minnow and Frank did find out, and their parents, and Blizzard, and they'd all been so kind. I stared at Gabriel and in my dream, my eyes began overflowing with tears. Why am I here? I tried to ask with my eyes. Why am I in this dungeon? Or am I back in the hospital? I yearned for him to answer. Even though my voice wouldn't work, Gabriel seemed to know what I was saying. He didn't speak, but I somehow heard his words in my mind, and they were the same words as when my wings had first appeared. To be able to fly is the most marvellous thing. You must try it. I remembered carefully moving the muscles in between my shoulders, and my wings had swept slowly up and down. I'd risen to hover next to Gabriel, and before I'd really known what I was doing, my wings were holding me steady in mid-air. Gabriel had smiled. I remembered sending him this message. Why me? Why did my dad have to die? The huge archangel had lowered his head. It's cruel, was the silent message that had entered my mind, and this is why I've been sent to you. I remembered wondering how having wings would help. Surely they would just make me the target of every cruel person, and I'd known far too many of them. I'd asked Gabriel, won't people be able to see my wings when I wake up from the coma? Only if you want them to, he'd replied. Because my younger selves were still with me, all ghostly and terrified, I'd asked if they could have wings too. Already done, said Gabriel. I remembered feeling glad for my younger selves. They'd been so terrified, and now having wings would cheer them. Shall we fly somewhere? Asked Gabriel. Can we? I remembered feeling strangely excited back in the hospital dream, and I felt that again in this new dream, the one I was having in the dungeon. Chapter 0.001, The Outskirts of Heaven. This is Still Sky writing in red. Gabriel's eyes are so large and kind. Am I awake? I asked, trying to see if my head was still bleeding. Gabriel smiled. Come on, we're in a dream together, but it's also very real. I'm going to show you the outskirts of heaven. Heaven? I asked. Am I dead? Am I really going to die this time? Of course not. You don't have to be dead to visit heaven. I felt confused. Every time I'd heard about heaven, people were either dying or dead. One day you'll be able to fly right into heaven, but today we'll just visit the edges. You'll love it. I still didn't understand. So I'm in a dungeon inside a computer game, unconscious, but I'm also flying to heaven with an archangel. Don't worry so much, said Gabriel. Your wings know how to guide you. Sometimes when people are unconscious for too long, they leave their bodies without really needing to, and they never return. Heaven wants you to remain alive for a very long time. You have things to do, places to be, so your wings have been given to you to help you with all of that. I remembered Gabriel saying the same things to me back on the last day of my coma when I was in the hospital. Gabriel's words made me feel a sense of hope, and each time I flapped my wings, I began to feel more and more awake. In this new dream, below me and all around was an incredible light. From it came a warmth which made my whole body feel as if it was singing with an enormous choir. I could see things too, amazing things. To describe them here would make me feel foolish, but I know that what I saw in my dream was more real than anything I've ever seen. While we were flying, Gabriel told me many stories about love and hatred and how to forgive. I kept worrying that I might forget what he was telling me, but he told me to relax and to just have fun. Gabriel said that if I ever needed wisdom, the stories would return at exactly the right time and help me. Flying felt good. It made me squeal with happiness on the inside and laugh. It made me laugh out loud, and then right in the middle of a huge burst of laughter, I woke up. I was still in the dungeon. I was still terrified, but somehow the dream had given me the tiniest piece of hope, and even though it was only as big as a speck of dust, or a mote, as my dad used to say, there was enough magic in it to allow me to take a deep breath and dare to believe that I might escape.